Let's get to this with the Roundtable now. I'm joined by ABC's Matthew Dowd, former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, now teaching at UC, University of California System, Bill Kristol, the Weekly Standard, Paul Krugman of the New York Times in Princeton. And Paul, you're looking great since the last time you were here.
Less of me, anyway.
Well, welcome to all of you. And Bill, let me begin with you. If we would have been here 2 months ago, you would have thought a shutdown was possible. But all of the leaders, Republican leaders in the House and Senate, against it, yet it's happening.
Well, you know, these people are elected individually. They're not elected to rubber stamp decisions by Speaker Boehner or by Leader McConnell. So they've decided they would like to delay the implementation of a bad law that is, in fact, the president himself has had to delay parts of it. If we were sitting here 11 months ago, though, and the Republicans were in total disarray, Romney had lost, very demoralized party, I think it's impressive what the Republicans have done, and the Republican House deserves credit for it, and the backbenchers in the Republican House deserve credit for it. The parties rally. The party's doing fine in the polls. The congressional ballot is about even. President Obama has not succeeded, except for that tax hike on the wealthy they had to give him right at the beginning. He's not succeeded in getting his legislation passed, which is a good thing. So I think...
Isn't a shutdown going to backfire?
Not necessarily if it's a day or two or three. There have been shutdowns throughout the last 25 years. And as you know, they don't always backfire. It's a little delicate. But look, why not delay at least parts of Obamacare for a year?
Because it's the signature achievement, you know, and it's funny.
Is that a good reason, a political reason like that?
And it's a good thing. It happens, in fact, to be a very good law. You see, one of the things I think that's going on here is just a failure on the part of the Republican caucus to actually understand anything about this thing. They haven't done the policy. They haven't understood. In fact, almost all of the substantive news about Obamacare over the last couple of months has been good. The premiums are coming in well below expectations. Healthcare costs are moderating. There will be some technical glitches with the computer systems, but those are not fundamental. So actually, people who support this law are looking forward. They're actually almost cheering at the preliminary results. So the odds are that this is going to do a lot of good for a lot of people. Why not put it into effect now?
Should the president have delayed the employer mandate?
The employer mandate was
Wait, should
funny...
he? Yes or no?
Yeah, actually, because...
Right, and so, but not the individual mandate.
They are completely
Big
different.
business gets the delay, but the individuals...
This is what I talk about, this policy ignorance, not understanding...
Is there something called...
That the employer mandate is basically a trivial add-on to the law, while the individual mandate is central to it. If you don't understand that, you don't understand
intellectual and political argument. I guess the bottom line, though, is that they don't have the votes to delay Obamacare right now. And I think a lot of the country looks at this and sees both sides saying, what are they doing right now?
Well, first, I want to say, after watching your interview with the foreign minister of Iran, it's somewhat amazing and ironic that more reasonableness and enlightenment is coming out of the Middle East than is coming out of Washington, D.C. these days. With everything that's happened with Syria and the chemical weapons and all that, it's like we are now in a situation where we have to look at ourselves and say, why isn't our own act in order? One of the biggest problems that's going on, I think, in this country today, and this government shutdown, which everybody knows is a bad idea and ultimately will be bad for the Republicans, and they only hope it's only temporarily bad, that is that way, is there's a large part of both parties that refuses to accept what actually is going on. So if they don't like the result of an election, they contest the election. If they don't like the result of a legislative, something passing the Senate, passing the House, signed by the president, which is the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, we actually are in a situation we should accept it. I have some disagreements with it. I think there's great parts of it. I think there's some parts of it that could be problematic. But it is the law, and we should accept it. But part of the problem is in our politics today is that we refuse to accept our institutions, our legislation, and our elections.
Of Democrats doing something comparable. This is just
of what? Of accepting elections?
Of refusing to accept the results of an election.
Democrats thought the Iraq War was wrong, right?
But they didn't cut off the funding.
They did try to cut off the funding throughout 2007, 2008. Oh, not seriously, really? What were all those votes about?
Where was there a confrontation like the one we are about to have, the scary one about the debt limit?
Well, and that's what I want to get to. It wasn't tied to the debt limit at the time, but the president seems to have made the judgment, Governor Granholm, that negotiating over the possibility of default is even worse. The consequences of negotiating are even worse than the default itself, if he means what he's saying right now.
Right, because that means every single time they put it off for another month, the debt limit, they will be taken hostage again. And we saw that in 2011. In fact, that's the lesson that people are taking from what happened the last time the negotiation occurred. To me, it is mind-blowing this week that we see leaders of our biggest global adversaries, Iran, Syria, I mean, to your point, acting more rationally than the House Tea Party Republicans, that they are willing to take the whole country, the whole economy down for an issue that they lost in the
Now,
election.
you know what the
They've
counter to
lost
that is?
40
They say the
times
president is
they
willing to
voted
talk
for
to the Iranians. Why doesn't he talk to the Republican leaders in the House?
Well, he said that he would negotiate with the leaders in the House, just not at a point where you break down the entire fiscal system in the country. I mean, if he wants to negotiate, if the House wants to negotiate over the budget, then meet with the Senate. The Senate's passed a budget. The House has passed a budget. Do it in the normal course of things.
That negotiating is, you give us something, we want, we'll give you something you want. Everybody wants the debt limit raised because nobody wants financial catastrophe. So saying, give us what we want in return for not provoking this catastrophe, which will hurt everybody, that's not a negotiation.
So how does this end?
That probably ends with a very short government shutdown, and I think it ends with the debt limit actually being raised. And hopefully the president will decide to negotiate, as previous presidents have, on the debt limit. One reason the House Republicans are pushing for a negotiation is that the Senate does not take up bills the House Republicans pass. They passed the suspension of the individual mandate, which is key to Obamacare. That's why it's a good thing to delay it for a year, and it's not ready to go into effect. They passed a delay of that for 1 year, with 22 House Democrats voting for it. Speaker, Majority Leader Harry Reid just hasn't taken it up. They haven't taken it up. They haven't taken it up. But also, I just want to say one thing. Suddenly, this great approval of the foreign minister of Iran and Syria, I think you guys really want to rethink before you start praising a guy who sat here and just lied to George about whether they have a nuclear weapons program or not. That is not like, oh, gee, they're so wonderful.
No,
they're so wonderfully rational.
The point is that people are willing to sit down and be rational for people who we have been adverse to for long periods of time. And you've got the House Republicans who will not act rationally. And just one more point about that.
You really want to take that position that the Iranian Republican Guard is more rational than the House Republicans?
Let her finish the point and then...
The way this ends, or at least the theory, is that it ends with, believe it or not, Wall Street coming to the rescue. That we have a government shutdown, and Wall Street suddenly says, oh, my God, this is real. These people really are that crazy, and they put pressure on the Republicans.
Well, that's one of the
unfortunate...
That's one of the biggest unfortunate things in all this, is because I think so much of what's going on in Washington, D.C. is we're taking our cues from Wall Street, which is only affecting, by and large, people own stocks, but by and large, 10% of the country is the only part of the country that has grown in the last 20 years, mainly by Wall Street. And so much of what's going on with the Republicans and the Democrats is their cues are coming from Wall Street. But I want to say one thing. I think the Republicans are being unreasonable, and they're doing things that could politically hurt them in this, and they should be in a process of getting this deal done. But the Republicans, it's not just Tea Party, 70, 80 members. That part of the Tea Party caucus, or whatever you call it, represents a large segment of the country, which does not trust the federal government at all to do anything efficiently and effectively. The president has not done any job at all in convincing the public that the government should be involved in stuff and it can do it well. And I think the Tea Party, or whoever is a reflection of the country does not trust Washington, D.C., and does not trust the federal government.
That's true, but let me then bring this question back to Bill Kristol. You say you think this is going to get resolved. It appears, though, given the factions in the Republican Party who don't want to approve anything, that the only way this gets resolved is if Speaker Boehner says, I'll do it with Democratic votes. Doesn't that cost him a speakership?
It doesn't cost him a speakership if he has to do it. But look, here's what's going to happen. I think the Senate will strike this attempt to delay Obamacare for a year. I think Republicans might then come back and say, well, how about striking the congressional exemption that the president just decided to give members of Congress and their staff? Maybe that the Senate will accept on the continuing resolution. What about the medical device tax, which the Republicans added with Democratic votes last night, which most Democratic senators are against? It's the Democrats who are being utterly intransigent in negotiating.
To prove how non-serious this is, though, they also added the ability of employers to deny contraception to women, which is also something that is completely politically ridiculous for them. And John Boehner, as Speaker, I think he has already ceded that territory. The real Speaker of the House is Ted Cruz.
Are you confident this gets done?
No, I'm not at all. I think we're running a 30% chance of, the government shutdown is a given, but that actually, we're all kind of feeling, okay, that's all right, which tells you what kind of a state we're in. But no, I think there's a 25-30% chance of a default, and God knows what happens
And
then.
given that, you still endorse the president's position of not negotiating?
Because his choice is not whether there will be a default. His choice is whether you just put off this issue a month or two. It's just going to keep coming back unless it's resolved, and why not do it now?
And ultimately, the politics of all this will be the implementation of Obamacare. If the implementation of Obamacare actually happens and people see savings, they see some wrinkles in it, and it goes about reasonably well, the president and the Democrats are going to be fine on that. If it does not go about reasonably well, somebody's going to address it in 2014 or 2015 and fix the problem. But ultimately, it's the implementation of the act. And I think Republicans just had said, go for it, implement the act, and let's see how it goes.
Ted Cruz came close to saying that was his fear this week, that Obamacare would take hold and people would never want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think he's wrong about that. I think when it takes hold, people will want to get rid of it. It doesn't benefit that many people, as Paul knows. In the first year, the red numbers are rather small. I think it will damage more people as their premiums go up, and as families lose coverage, as businesses cut back to covering simply the employee himself or herself, and families have to go into the exchanges. So I'm happy. I mean, I think it's bad law. We'll see how it plays out. But you can't really blame people who ran saying they would do their best to delay this bad law from happening for trying to do that. It's like Democrats ran saying in 2006. Democrats ran in 2006. Democrats ran in 2006 saying they were going to get us out of Iraq, and they spent all of 2007, 2008 undercutting our efforts in Iraq.
But Bill, this law passed, was signed by the president. Then the president ran a re-election campaign. The American public voted for him overwhelmingly. Republicans need to fold their tent and say it's the law.
I disagree totally. The
On that
members of
disagreement,
Congress
we are
are
going to have to end right now. Thank you all very much.